to July's episode of Third Space Live. Third Space Live, if you haven't seen it before, is a show that offers ideas, conversations, and stories around building mental wellness in our community. Today, I want to acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nations. The topic this month that we're going to be talking about is overdose and overdose prevention. And we're really thankful to have our guest Brandon Tremblay on the show today. He's going to speak to us about some really great facts and tips and resources. And before I jump into introducing Brandon and asking him some particular questions, I thought that it was important that I share with you some stats that when we were researching the show, we came across. The first one are from the BC Coroner's Report, and this is from January 2021 to May 2021. So May of this year is actually the 15th consecutive month where we have experienced over 100 illicit drug deaths per month. So 15 months in a row, we've experienced over 100 illicit drug deaths. This works out to about 5.5 people per day on average dying from drug toxicity. From January until May of this year, 851 people have died in BC due to illicit drug death. 80% of these individuals were male. And of these people, 70% were of the ages 30 to 59. So one thing that stood out to me when I was looking at these statistics is that the most common cause of unnatural death in BC is actually illicit drug overdose. Number 2 is suicide. Number 3 is motor vehicle accidents. And 4th is homicide. My question for you as the viewers is this a direct representation of what you are seeing in the news, what you're seeing on your social feeds, what you're talking about in your circles? I, for one, when I started researching this show, I had no idea that drug overdose was the #1 cause of unnatural death in BC. That was really eye-opening for me. And when you talk about specifically the substances, extreme concentrations of fentanyl are detected in 85% of overdoses this past year. So that's an 80% increase from 2012, where the numbers were only 5%. So I'm going to say that one more time. 85% of overdoses in the past year had extreme concentrations of fentanyl. So, and the last stat I want you to hear before we start talking to Brandon is that in the Q1 RCMP report for our region stated that police response calls in relation to drug overdose went up by 76% in comparison to this time last year. I want to pause on that one because that number doesn't lie. Police have responded to drug overdose in an increase by 76, they've gone up by 76% in relation to last year, this time. So this is why we felt that it'd be really relevant and important for us to speak about drug overdose and illicit drug use today. And I want to bring Brandon on. He's a nurse who has had previous experience in harm reduction in multiple community settings, tons of experience. He's worked with a variety of people from differing backgrounds, and he's here to talk to us today about overdose, harm reduction, and to give us some tips and tools that we can use with our loved ones and in our community. So with that said, welcome to the show, Brandon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to have you here. We really think that it's important that we put on the platform people who are directly impacting our community, and I know firsthand the amazing work that you're doing out there. So let's dive in. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about today are substances. So when it comes to accidental overdose, what substances could people be at risk of overdosing with?
Mm-hmm. And I think, like, I think in reality, it's sort of any, basically like any substance. I think, like in your stats that you're saying, most of them is containing fentanyl. So I think for people who are using substances, and if they don't know like their dealer, if they don't know kind of where it's coming from, that does add like an extra risk to it. They don't know what is fully in it. And so like whether that's like cocaine, crystal meth, marijuana, even if they think they're using like heroin or like fentanyl, it could be stronger than what they think. And so I think a lot of just like sort of substances that they might not necessarily think that, oh yeah, this is going to cause an overdose, and it still has that inherent risk to it, I would say. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot more of. Just those accidental overdoses that like they didn't think there was fentanyl in it, and they weren't able to do some like drug checking. There are like many places now that like have like fentanyl test strips, whether it's like a safe consumption site. I think like UBCO has like an FTIR machine, and they can do some drug checking, and they, I think, want to promote that, like Living Positive downtown as well. There are many places that now can sort of check for fentanyl, as well as something like a benzodiazepine being mixed in with some of those substances. It kind of just perpetuates the effect, like with using like an opiate. It's really just like decreasing your body's motivation to like breathe. It's really inhibiting your respiratory system, and piling a benzodiazepine on that is just like kind of furthering it. And so yeah, like just super dangerous. And so I think within that, I don't know if there's I think you typically think of like heroin as fentanyl, heroin kind of being as like the typical culprits, but realistically, there is the chance it can be in almost whatever you're using.
And when you say it, you mean fentanyl?
Yeah, and like you said in the statistics, it's mostly fentanyl that's causing these overdoses. For people who are like opiate naive, they've never used an opiate before, and fentanyl is a very, very strong one. So when however they're using their drug, it's just that much more dangerous, I suppose.
So get your drugs checked.
Yeah, and just like use with other people. Have this is probably another question that's coming up, but like have naloxone, and we kind of say like just like start slow. Like when you are using, just like use a little bit, see how it feels, and then kind of continue with the rest of it. And trying to use with another person, kind of just creating sort of some safety barriers. If you are using alone, there's like the Lifeguard app for people that they can sign up. It's like an app for like if you are like using alone, you sort of like sign into it, and then you basically sign into it. You kind of like notify when you're using, and then it sort of follows along and gives some prompts along the way just to see that you are like still conscious, and then you click the button, and then if there isn't any response, then it kind of eventually it basically sends like EMS to the person's place, like using their location. And
oh wow.
Yeah, so yeah, like a super cool app. You do need like Wi-Fi for it, like some sort of Wi-Fi connection, but yeah, like a cool app for a lot of people if they are using alone, and just like another way to kind of stay safe in that.
That's really good. And you know what? I am going to ask you about tips and tools, and I think that there's a lot more out there than what the majority of us know. And, but first, I want to talk a bit about harm reduction, because harm reduction, I've even had these conversations with family. It gets a bad rap sometimes, and
right.
can have some stigma attached to it. And so what I'd love is for those who are watching, may not know what harm reduction is. Can you explain it to them and what the benefits of harm reduction are?
Yeah, and again, like I'm not I'm not gonna get this like perfect. Like I think there's like an overarching, like there's several pillars to like harm reduction, and like people who have like developed this idea like know so much more than I do, and this has kind of just been like, I guess, a part of like my practice as I've done like training in harm reduction. And but yeah, there's definitely like more to learn, and again, I would even encourage that. And I think one piece definitely is like there's this compassionate piece of harm reduction, of meeting someone where they're at, which I totally love, and in whatever like walk of life that you're in. I think like people deserve that, but I think there is this like practical part to it as well. And I think like within like outside of like substance use, like on a hot day, like super hot day like we just had like last week, a piece of harm reduction would honestly just be a bottle of water, which like you're not gonna like just withhold someone a bottle of water because they need that, right? They can, a lot of things can happen. So many people died from these like from the heat, the really intense heat we had.
Yeah, I was reading about that, about in BC, how many people had died just because of the heat.
Because of the heat.
Yeah, I like the compassion piece of it. There's a common humanity piece to that, right?
Totally.
Denying someone of something that they need.
Yeah, and I think like even in terms of like the practicality part, it's like I can give you, you know, like maybe $3 worth of water that's going to help save your life, or you can go into like heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and you're going to have to go to the hospital, use a lot of like services, whoever you're going to see, however much money that costs. And it's like, or we could have just given you, you know, a bottle of water that costs $2.50. And I think similarly, when we bring that back to substance use, it's like, okay, we're trying to prevent like the spread of some of these diseases. We're trying to prevent overdose. So we're going to give you, I don't know how much like a clean needle costs. I don't think it's that much. I'm going to say like $4. But instead, like, let's give you a clean needle to help stop the spread of some of these diseases. And therefore it's like, yeah, that's preventing further harm. That's preventing further, I guess, cost to the like healthcare system down the road. And I think not that that's what harm reduction is just about, and that's why I kind of started with that compassion piece. Like it's not just, I don't want to just be like, yeah, we're just, you know, it's all about cost saving, but I think there is that important part of, yes, we are trying to, you know, save costs where we can, and but at the same time, yeah, like I think it is one of like the pillars of harm reduction, just having that compassion piece, and meeting people where they're at. And it's like, okay, like at this moment in your life, you're going to use regardless. And so like, if I can give you something that is clean and that helps prevent further, possible further like infection or like spread of disease like down the road, it's like, why not? Like, I think that's super important. And I think like with your kind of the statistics you gave at the beginning, I don't know if we hear it in the news all that much. I feel like the news is usually when we like, you know, you find like a needle in the park, which is super unfortunate. And we often give out needle boxes as well. Like when we give needles out as harm reduction supplies, we give boxes of needles as well, so they can put them in there and then take them to like a pharmacy or some a place that does like a needle exchange sort of thing. So there is that part as well.
Well, I like what you have said. No, there's a lot there, and
Yeah.
What I like about what you're saying is people can relate to harm reduction in different ways. I think
totally.
So
Yeah.
people can relate to harm reduction from a compassion side, a humanistic view, a view that, you know, all humans should be, you know, taken care of and treated equally in a loving and compassionate way. And if you can't relate to harm reduction in that way, maybe because you are very far removed from addiction and you've never, you know, seen that in your life, or you don't have a lot of compassion there because of the way, the lens that you've grown up with, or whatever it is, then maybe you can relate to it this way, which is the logical way.
Right.
You know, the way of like the practical way that you're bringing up in terms of you know, relieving expenses on the healthcare system, and so I think it's good that you bring up both, because we have lots of different people that watch the show, and it's nice to view it from different angles. I think it's also cool that you're talking about the actual tangible resources that you use in the community. Can you list off some of those? Like, what are some tangible harm reduction tools that that you would use?
Like actual like pieces of like harm reduction that you give out, or like okay, like such as like needles and other things, yes, or
sure.
Okay, yeah. I mean, and I think like I think it comes down to like, again, like who you're sort of seeing. Like, again, I think like on a hot day, the best harm reduction piece would be like a bottle of water. But yeah, for people who like do inject substances, it's like a clean needle, like an alcohol swab to keep their skin clean, some sterile water for what they sort of like cook their substances in, everything so it can be clean and sterile, so that they're able to like decrease the risk of infection, other like illnesses, and like the spread of some of those illnesses. And again, for like people who smoke, there's different sort of like glass kind of like smokeware. We like they call them like different things in the community. I think most of the time we use like a stem or like a bubble, and they're just used to smoke different substances. But again, like using like we give away different like mouthpieces. So like for people who may be sharing, it's like you can change the mouthpiece so there's no like spread of anything from person to person. Again, like alcohol swabs, and yeah, like just like different things to keep them keep the risk of like infection and spread of disease low, I suppose. And I think like going back to the, I guess, harm reduction point, like, and I think maybe like there is this, there may or may not be, and I'm not sure, but this idea that like harm reduction is almost curing them, maybe. Like if we give them a needle, like, you know, it's going to cure them, or like, why aren't they changing? You know, like with, I'm giving you a needle, so you should be changing. Like, we're helping you, so why aren't you changing your habits, kind of thing. And I don't know if that's necessarily the point of harm reduction. It's like that.
I personally would not view it as that.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say it's like the first point of contact. And within giving those supplies, it's like, hey, like, how are you using? Like, are you using safely? Like, do you know about some of these other resources? Like, are you thinking about getting connected? Do you have any goals around your substance use? different things like that. It's this sort of like opening into the conversation. And yeah, like just, yeah, like having compassion for that person, meeting them where they're at. It's like, okay, like, you know, I'll see you again like next time, you know, and we'll get further next time, and building that sort of relationship with that person.
Yeah, I wonder, like, is there the hope in when you do work in harm reduction that people do, you know, heal or become, you know, what do you call it when you're not addicted anymore, in recovery?
Yeah.
Go through, like, is that even what it's about, or is it about, like you said, meeting people where they're at, helping them do what they do safely, and it's not necessarily about recovery?
Right. And I think like, I think that's tough because I think like ideally it's like, yes, that is always the hope. I think there is the ideal there. And I think that, you know, for like a clinician, from clinician to clinician, they might have differing thoughts about that. It's like, yeah, maybe for one, it's like, yes, that is always the hope. And maybe for another, it's like, maybe not. And I don't know if that, I don't know if that idea fully like matters, whether that's like a true statement or not. It's just like, can we help this person, and can we help them get to where they want to get and feel comfortable to get. So yeah, I think like, yeah, ideally yes, but I don't know if that necessarily is the point anymore. I don't think the point is ever just to like, I think when you talk with people who use like substances, like as you chat, you can most likely both agree on that this isn't a place where they want to be in their life. And so I wouldn't say it's the point is just to sort of like leave them there, but I think it's to work with them to kind of figure out some goals that they want to kind of like achieve and maybe someday get to. And help sort of like guide them. And I think like harm reduction is that sort of like opening piece.
Right, almost keeping you safe until you're able to advocate for so you are able to advocate for yourself and pursue recovery in a way that is unique to you.
Definitely, yeah.
The reason why I asked that was just because I found myself in some of my previous social work endeavors having that lens sometimes was detrimental to me and made the job really hard, because if you're seeing the same behaviors and then there's that, you know, that letdown or that frustration that things have not changed and that you feel like you have not made a difference. Or, you know, so if you're, do you get what I'm saying? Like if you're
totally
doing it from that lens of like, I'm trying to make someone better, these people, you know, I'm trying to help them recover, and then you're not seeing that, then doing your job could be somewhat emotionally taxing. Whereas if you're looking at it through a lens of, I love how you're saying meeting people where they're at and keeping people safe today in the moment, so that hopefully down the road they can advocate for themselves. I kind of like that better, but I agree that it's probably unique to the individual in the field.
And I think like even for myself, like it's so easy to have like to kind of go down that road of like change, like come on. I think that's it's so easy, and it does become like frustrating at that point, and again, like that, whoever you're working with, like that person has to make the change. Like you can probably do everything in the world and tire yourself out, but it's like that person has to make that specific change. And so I think the point is just to like come alongside them and be with them more during the journey, instead of like you have to change, you have to do this, and and again, like I think it's a newer way of kind of going like about like the substance use world and the mental health world. And I like we're still learning tons. I'm still learning tons for sure. And
always.
yeah, like yeah. Um,
So what would you say? What would you say would be some overdose prevention tips? I know you'd mentioned the Lifesaver app, and
yeah, yeah.
I think not using alone is such a great tip.
Mm-hmm.
Getting your drugs checked.
Mm-hmm.
Can you spout off some locations, some local locations for drug checking? I know you said the UBCO campus.
Yeah, they have, yeah, and I think I don't know the number off the top of my head, and I totally should. But they have like a number that like you can kind of text and like inquire. Because they have like
where the testing sites are.
no, for like the UBCO one. And then
Okay.
there is the Living Positive Resource Center downtown.
Okay.
There's also like the safe consumption site that like Interior Health has. And I think those are the ones off the top of my head. So like yeah, those would kind of be like the main ones. And
What about, tell us for people who haven't or who don't really know what naloxone is or what a naloxone kit is and the importance of that and where to get them.
yeah, and so I'm pretty sure you can pick them up at most pharmacies. I'm pretty sure. If not, there's many like Interior Health buildings that have them as well. You could definitely like inquire. There might even like if you looked up on Google like where can I get naloxone, I'm sure something would come up like sort of for near you. But yeah, like essentially like naloxone, because like it's so important because like so many of the overdoses, like you're saying, involve fentanyl, which is an opioid. Narcan basically like reverses that, and it's only for opioids. Kind of for like the receptors that are in your brain, it's a stronger sort of substance that kind of overpowers the like illicit or just the whatever you're using, and kind of reignites your drive to breathe and kind of that conscious to become conscious again, I suppose. But more just that like that breathing respiratory
response.
Restart. Yeah, response.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, and there are many like there are many places that like do like naloxone training. Like I think again, like if you went to like an Interior Health building, or like I'm sure like places like Living Positive will, I don't know for sure, but I'm sure they would do some sort of training with you. And again, I'm sure you could probably Google that as well, just to do like some kind of quick training. But yeah, like again, like just having that on you in case of like an overdose, and for people who are just like kind of just like almost like just dabbling in some substance use, you know, like whether it's at a party or you know, you only use once in a while, like I would say like that is an important piece to using safely, having that naloxone, because for whatever those substances, if there was the chance that there was like an opiate in there, like if you don't use that often, like your body's going to be quite naive to that, and it's probably not going to take a lot to like cause you to go unconscious and overdose essentially. So I think that is a huge piece, and I think yeah, like again, like decreasing that stigma around like even just carrying naloxone. It's like we just want to have compassion on people, and again, like you know, we don't want them to die, and there have been like awesome like positive stories, and I think like I think in my head what helps sometimes is like I think there's a lot of things like decrease stigma, and I think that's so important. Not getting away from that at all, but I think for my head what helps is like more of like a positive. So for me it's like okay, like increase compassion. Like we're humans, like we all have some sort of way to cope with things that go wrong in our lives and trauma that has happened to us. And some of us like aren't as lucky, I suppose, to have like maybe better coping mechanisms taught to us or inspired to us. And I think trauma is like, I don't fully know if it's like an actual statistic, but I would say like most people who you meet that like are using substances, like I would guess that like trauma is there like 100% of the time.
I agree.
And more than you would think. And so it's like, like, yeah, okay, instead of like, waving my finger, it's like, no, you need compassion. You need that like help and that positivity that maybe they didn't ever have.
So your role requires a lot of resilience to be able to walk alongside that suffering and see it firsthand. And one thing that we ask everyone who comes on the show is about their own self-care. And we interview a lot of frontline mental health workers, and so I'd be really curious as to how you take care of yourself in your role with the things that you see and the things that you've seen in the past, and what would you say to other frontline workers who are doing things similar to you? What would be your top self-care tip?
I don't know if I have like a top one. I think like community is super like important, and for me like that involves like a church group, and for whatever, like if church isn't your thing, like find sort of what is your thing. If it's not like super religious, that's totally fine. Like something that is like that you find positive, and kind of can connect with. I think that's super important, and just having that like community piece that like will listen, and if you are having just a rough time, it's like they'll kind of come around you. And and I think for me, like I like biking. Like biking is quite therapeutic for me, and I don't know, reading, whatever is like.
Oh, those are great. Those are really great. You know what? Self-care doesn't have to be some complicated genius thing. Like feeling connected to a community or connected to something bigger than yourself, is therapy. Being, connected to nature, moving your body. We hear that a lot. And taking time away from screens and busy things to read a book is fantastic. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention today, lastly, before we hop off the call, I wanted to talk about the Bridge Youth and Family Services. I wrote this down because I want to get this right. So in April of this year, they opened the very first youth recovery house in Kelowna. These are for individuals ages 12 to 18. And this is for youth that are experiencing problematic substance use. To think that there's only 10 beds to me sounds like not enough, but I'm also not, I'm not really connected. But what I wanted to say to our viewers is that in the spirit of talking about overdose and substance use and illicit drug use today, I wanted to let you know that the Bridge is actually in phase 2 of their fundraising phase for this youth recovery program. And if any of you are inspired by our conversation to do more in your community and help out, I would say check out the Bridge, and we'll make sure to have their information in the comments for you, because that's a really valuable newer program in the community that I'm not sure everyone knows about. And I want to say thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on the show and talking talking to us today about all of the resources and tips and tools that are out there. And I'm really grateful for your compassionate view and the compassionate work that you're doing in our community. So thank you so much for joining us today. And to all of the viewers, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next month. Take care.